News from the nation's highest court. The United States Supreme Court issued its long-awaited ruling in the affirmative action case. And what did the highest court decide? Well, it struck down affirmative action, the court stating that race cannot be used as a factor in Harvard's and the University of North Carolina's decision to admit a student. The court's conservative majority effectively reversed the admission plans at both Harvard and University of North Carolina. Chief Justice John Roberts, writing for the majority, said the student must be treated based on his or her experiences as an individual, not on the basis of race. Many universities have for too long done just the opposite. Now, President Biden made a statement after the court's decision was released.
Today, the court once again walked away from decades of precedent and as the dissent has made clear, we cannot let this decision be the last word. While the court can render a decision, it cannot change what America stands for.
One of the two universities parties to the Supreme Court case is Harvard. And after the decision, Harvard University released a statement stating, in part, the court also ruled that colleges and universities may consider in admissions decisions an applicant's discussion of how race affected his or her life, be it through discrimination, inspiration, or otherwise. We will certainly comply with the court's decision. Harvard Law Professor Emeritus Alan Dershowitz joins me. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. This was a great day for the Constitution, a great day for the legacy of Martin Luther King, who I heard personally utter the words, "I dream of a time when my children will be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the quality of their character." So this is a day to celebrate, and now we have to wonder whether or not there'll be efforts by Harvard and other universities to drive a truck through that little loophole that the Supreme Court left that you just quoted.
How did we get here? I mean, in the sense that, you know, there were cases going back to 1978. I think Bakke was the first one I remember having to do with admission, yeah. And then there have been a course of several. I mean, were all the decisions all along that have been now reversed in essence by this one? Were they wrong, or were they handling a problem at the time and serving a purpose?
They had a problem at the time. The first decision, DeFunis and then Bakke. The dissenters were the liberals. Chief Justice Bill Douglas, William Douglas, the most liberal person probably in the history of the Supreme Court, dissented and said, no, race can't be considered. You can consider poverty, you consider opportunities. I wrote a series of articles starting in the 1970s opposing race-specific affirmative action on a liberal point of view, from a liberal point of view. And the irony is that this liberal decision that came down today was rendered by 6 conservatives over the opposition of 6 people who call themselves liberal. But this decision represents classic liberalism, meritocracy. Judge people on the merits. Don't judge people on the basis of their race. We've been fighting for that since the 14th Amendment, and today we won. Those of us who believe in a colorblind society won a substantial victory.
Does this decision apply? I mean, I know it applies to public universities. I assume that if you're a totally private university, are you free to do what you want? And I realize some private universities also get public funding of some sort. But what if you're solely a private university? Are you subject to this?
Yes, Harvard is solely a private university, but
it gets public money, though, doesn't it? I mean,
of course.
It's so interlocked with the federal government.
Well, so is every other school, including religious schools. Yeshiva University, St. John's University, Fordham, they all get federal funding of some kind. So this is a broad-based decision. The Supreme Court didn't really get into that issue. It talked about the equal protection, but I think it applies broadly. Apparently it exempts, though, military academies. I don't know why, but it will apply broadly, and it will apply, I think, beyond universities, and it will apply as well to other institutions which are state actors. And so I think it's a giant step toward a colorblind society. The vast, vast majority of Americans approve this. I'm told that the majority of people from every racial background essentially approve a colorblind society, but the elitists don't. I mean, think about the implications of before this decision. If you had 2 applicants for a position, it's a zero-sum game for admissions. One of them is a very wealthy black whose parents went to Exeter and Harvard, and one of them is a federal judge, and the other is a hedge fund operator. And the student got okay grades, but not great grades. And a white student who grew up in Appalachia and whose mother died of a fentanyl overdose, whose father left home, and who went to a mediocre school and worked very hard and has slightly better grades. slightly better recommendations. What is the possible justification for preferring the privileged black over the unprivileged white? And yes, that's what race-specific affirmative action does. That has now ended. So race is no longer to be a factor. Whether they can still make it a factor and still impose the same quotas. Remember, the Supreme Court basically said that Harvard has a quota system. It gave the statistics. Every year, the number of African Americans is almost identical. The number of Asian Americans who are discriminated against is almost entirely the same. Harvard had two quotas, a ceiling for Asian Americans, and a floor for African Americans. That's not the American way.
Harvard Law Professor Emeritus Alan Dershowitz, thank you, sir.
Thank you.